the TNBS presents the NFL Week 3 Pick'em Podcast. I'm your host, Tommy, a.k.a. Millsy, joined by
Chris, a.k.a. Hazazel. You can find me on Twitter at HazazelT.
and you can find me on Twitter at Millsy021, and you can follow the Nosebleed section on Twitter at TNBS021. Before we get into things, I want to ask you, Chris, what did you think of last week?
Last week was a fun week. I feel like Fitzmagic might actually have to be someone I genuinely consider as a credible threat, which is crazy. And and as a Cowboys fan, I got to have the pleasure of watching DeMarcus Lawrence and Taco Charlton hand Eli the eviction notice for the house that Eli supposedly built. Now he's been evicted officially, and made me a happy Cowboys fan because I didn't expect them to win, and that defense looked fantastic.
Well, I will rebuttal that by saying it will always be the house that Eli built. That won't be changed. However, you can't serve an eviction notice when they weren't renting. So he lost it to foreclosure, and the bank that foreclosed on him just so happened to be the Cowboys' defensive line. But yeah, we'll hop right into it, and we'll start with a tough divisional game. The Saints head to Atlanta, where Atlanta's a 3.5-point favorite. And as you'd expect, this game's projected to be a shootout with the second highest total on the day with 53. Yeah, what do you think? Well, real quick, sorry, but I will say, obviously Keanu Neal's out, done for the year. Deion Jones out. And I just want to give a couple stats real quick. Julio Jones versus Marshawn Lattimore last year had 4 catches for 79 yards, and Lattimore had an interception that was in week 13. Then it was in week 16. Julio had 7 for 149 against Lattimore. Michael Thomas in 4 career games against Atlanta has 31 catches on 44 targets for 410 yards and 3 touchdowns. And Alvin Kamara last year struggled against the Falcons. In his first game, he had 1 rush for 2 yards and 3 catches for 25 yards. And in game 2, he had 12 rushes for 32 yards and 7 catches for 58 yards with no touchdowns. And I just wanted to throw those out there before we made our picks.
Yeah, I mean, the Keanu Neal is a big deal. Devontae Freeman, obviously, being out, that's a big deal. I do think this is going to be a shootout. And if you're a fantasy person, this is a game stack that I'm planning on doing all weekend. But I'm surprised here. So Atlanta's getting 3.5 at home.
They're giving 3.5.
Oh, excuse me. They're giving 3.5 at home.
Yep.
I mean, if you take away how many rushing touchdowns did Matt Ryan have last week?
2.
Yeah. So I mean, you take those 2 rushing touchdowns away, and he had a pretty mediocre day. I mean, we threw for like 240, 260, something like that, and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I just don't know that that's enough to keep up with New Orleans. I do think that's going to be the Julio Jones, Michael Thomas show. I think the both of them are just going to go absolutely berserk. But I think at this point, Drew Brees is just pissed. So I'm gonna have to give it to Saints across the board. What's the over/under? 53.
53. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the over. I think you might see either Julio or Michael Thomas go for 200 yards and two or 3 touchdowns alone.
Definitely plausible, and as I mentioned earlier, Michael Thomas has had success against Atlanta in his career. This is a tough one. I feel like, I don't know, I feel like 3.5 is a lot for the Falcons to be giving in this game. I understand the struggle so far with the Saints, especially on the defensive side, and they're going to be without Tack McKinley on their defensive line this week as well. Deion Jones is arguably the fastest linebacker from playing sideline to sideline. He was also the leading tackler last year, so that's a huge loss, as well as Keanu Neal. And like you said, I think Drew Brees and I think that the Saints as a whole, I think they're pissed off. And while I expect Julio to have a good game, Matt Ryan I know it's 2 games, and that's why I don't base too much off of it. But even last year, he struggled. They were terrible in the red zone last year. Struggled in week 1 in the red zone. I can't trust the Falcons giving 4 points. So I'm going to have to agree. I'm taking the Saints across the board. I mean, it does worry me a little bit, but I don't have that much faith in Matt Ryan, especially right now. And last week, Calvin Ridley also stepped up and had 4 catches for 84 yards and a touchdown. So I'm not sure if he's going to be able to replicate that performance this week. The Saints did make a switch at corner too. They're starting P.J. Williams, over Ken Crawley. Ken Crawley's been torched for 7 catches, 149 yards, and 2 touchdowns in 2 games so far this year. So I mean, not crazy numbers, but you give up 100 yards in 1 game and a touchdown. You give up 49 yards and a touchdown the next game. You're giving up touchdowns. You can't have corners be giving up points like that. So that actually might make a difference. I like Marshawn Lattimore to have an impact against Julio after getting torched week 1 against Mike Evans. So I agree. I'm going to have to take the Saints across the board. And as far as the over-under, I'm going to have to agree. I'm going to have to take the over. I think the Saints defense is going to be pissed off, but I don't think it's going to be enough to stop them. I think the Saints are going to be the majority of this point. I think, we see a 30-27 game. We're at 57, so I definitely expect some points to be scored in this game. But we'll leave Atlanta and hop on the red eye to Minnesota, where the lowly Bills step in or come into Minnesota, face the highly ranking Vikings, or the mighty Vikings. It is a low total to 40 and a half over under, but the Vikings are huge favorites, giving 16 and a half. And Michelle McCoy is questionable, a true questionable this week. Hasn't practiced, but he doesn't have a rib injury. So, what do you think about this one?
I think regardless, with him having a rib injury, even if he does play, it's going to be 35%, 40% shady at most. On top of the fact that they're just a terrible team. I mean, almost every team that's played them has been giving them double-digit points. At this point, they're getting over 2 touchdowns. Like that's they're almost you need to beat them by 2 touchdowns and a field goal.
Yep.
Like, let that sink in for a second. Like, Jesus. So, I definitely, I don't know. I know we usually don't like to take these big spreads, when it's that big of a spread. But I think Buffalo is just that bad of a team. Again, I could see them putting up 0 points this week, and I'll probably be right on this one again. Because there's no shady to even put that 1 touchdown up that I said last time. So I realistically think they get shut out, and I think Minnesota just laughs at them while they, shred that secondary. So I'm going, without a doubt, Minnesota across the board. What's the over-under again? 40 and a half? I'm going to have to go with the under, just because as much as I think Minnesota is going to destroy Buffalo, I don't think Buffalo contributes any points to it. I don't think they're going to beat them 40 and a half. Teams just don't do that in this league. And unless you're the Patriots. So, I don't see it happen. I'm going to have to go with the under.
I'm kind of torn on the over-under. For me, it's Vikings across the board. Josh Allen as a rookie on the road. You line up Xavier Rhodes opposite Kelvin Benjamin. Benjamin's a non-factor. You still have Harrison Smith in the backfield. In the secondary at safety. This Vikings defense is a top 5 defense in the NFL, and the Bills' offense is a bottom 2, bottom 3 offense in the NFL. So I just don't see them scoring many points. But the only thing that worries me is I do think that they will score. I think they'll get some garbage time points. And what worries me is that the Vikings go up, say 30, they put up 31, and then the Bills score 10 cheap garbage time points from the third quarter and the fourth quarter. That's what worries me. And then we hit 41, and that half a point's the difference. So I'm going to take the Vikings across the board, but I'm going to go with the over. I'm not confident in that, but I just don't. I don't think the Bills get shut out. I think they rally a bit more behind Josh Allen than they do Peterman, just because where Allen was drafted. He does have a strong arm. Um, he did make some comments that probably make his teammates look at him in a different light, but he was 16 years old at the time. I'm sure he addressed that with them. So I think that they'll play hard enough to score 7 to 10 points, and I think the Vikings score around 31 to 34. So I think they hit that 41 mark in that half a point. So I'm gonna have to take the Vikings. We'll leave Minnesota as quick as possible and head to Carolina, uh, where Cincinnati's coming in as 2.5 point underdogs. The game has a total of 44. As far as injuries, I know Trey Turner, the guard for the Panthers, is going to be out again this week. Obviously, Greg Olson and Curtis Samuel also expected to be out this week. Um, what do you think? Any more injury news or weather concerns? Or
No, nothing that I see here, but the that Curtis Samuel injury is quite significant actually for Carolina. I mean, they're already losing weapons left and right. To lose your number two, you're putting an awful lot of pressure on Devin Funchess and Christian McCaffrey. Um, I still like the Panthers. The thing is, AJ Green went absolutely berserk on Thursday Night Football last week. So
3 touchdowns.
It's one of them things where you kind of have to look at it and be like, the Panthers are going to struggle on offense. They got to find themselves, especially this week, without having Samuel too on top of not having Olsen. Like they were adjusting, but that's another big blow.
Well, they did have Samuel has been out.
Okay.
So he
Oh,
actually
I thought he played last week.
no, he had a believe it was a heart procedure, kind of like out of nowhere in before week one, and then obviously was ruled out for week one. Returned to practice this week, but I think in a limited fashion, but was also out week two. So he has been out. That's why we've seen so much of DJ Moore early on and Jarris Wright, who's stepped in for him. But I mean, it is still a big loss because he has chemistry with Cam Newton. Cam Newton had him last year. He's at least comfortable with him. But
Right.
so it definitely is a big loss to not have him in the game, especially like you said with no Greg Olson.
Yeah, I mean, and you're putting a lot of pressure on Moore at that point as a rookie to step up in a way that we don't expect to see. Rookie wide receivers come up. That's one of the toughest transition positions into the NFL. Wide receiver and cornerback are the two, top two. And you're looking at it going, how much can this kid bend, not break? The Bengals are obviously without Mixon, which is big. Still without Perfect, so that affects them too. I'm going to say I want to say it's going to be like a 1 point game. This is going to be like a 20-21 game. It's going to be a couple really big runs from McCaffrey, a couple pretty good, pretty big plays from AJ Green. But I'm going to take the Bengals with the spread. And I got to go with my gut. I'm going to take the Bengals straight up too. And what's the over-under again?
It was 44.
I could see that because I could see 24-21. So I'm going to go with the over.
Yeah, I mean the Bengals have started the season 2-0. Obviously, last week put a hurting on the Ravens at home. Week one beat Indy in Indy. I personally believe they have an underrated trio of corners that didn't get enough credit. Yes, they have underachieved, but they've shown flashes, and another year playing together, getting comfortable with each other. It only helps, especially in the off season. So I'm kind of torn on this though because I don't. The Panthers at home, they are a tough team at home, and Cam, as we know, is tough to stop. But the Bengals have a solid pass rush too, so it's like the Panthers' strengths match up with the Bengals' strengths. So we're gonna see like head-on collision between strengths of both teams. And when we get that, it's always hard to predict those games because it's kind of like who does it better. And when both teams are missing people, like you mentioned, Perfect, which is a huge loss. That's their signal caller on defense. And for the Panthers, you're missing Trey Turner, an offensive guard. You're missing Curtis Samuel, Greg Olsen, all comfortable or all reliable targets for Cam. We saw Christian McCaffrey go off last week, and with Perfect out, and that's the weakest part of the Bengals defense is their linebackers. So I'm fully expecting a big game from Christian McCaffrey. But I think the Panthers win straight up, and I think it's going to be a weird scoring game. I could see like 25-23 or something weird like that, like 25-22. I don't know why. The Bengals sometimes tend to have those weird scoring games. The same thing with the Panthers, where they get like a safety or miss an extra point or get a 2-point conversion. But I just think Cam's on a roll, and the Panthers have said they want to get Christian McCaffrey touches between 20 to 25 a game. Now he's not seeing that so much in the rush game, but he's seeing it more in the pass game. But I think it's smart because with the offensive lineman issues for Carolina, they get their best player involved in a way they get him in space, lined up with linebackers, as opposed to having to find the hole and break tackles and more wear and tear on his body. So I'm expecting another big game from McCaffrey, and I'm taking the Panthers across the board with the over. Like I said, I think it's a weird scoring game, but I think we do see some points in this game. We'll leave Carolina and head into Baltimore, where I believe it's expected to rain this week. I think I saw something like that there might be some wet weather there. Broncos heading in, and the Ravens are 4.5-point favorites. We have a total of 45.5. And what are you thinking here?
Well, I'm very underwhelmed with the Broncos offense. With Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Thomas, as weapons, I just feel like they would be more explosive than they are. I mean, look at, Deshaun Watson with, obviously they're not the same caliber, but, DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller, Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. I expect more from them. The Ravens, I know you're not a big fan of Flacco. You don't have much faith in his abilities. I like Alex Collins in this matchup. I think he's going to have himself a little bit of game. But I could see the Broncos keeping it close. So I'm going to take the Broncos with the spread.
Real quick, before you make your picks, I do have a little nugget I want to throw in just before you do make it. Joe Flacco, his home road splits. On the road, he's got 92 touchdowns in his career to 80 interceptions. At home, it's significantly better. He has a 113 to 52 touchdown to interception ratio. So that's a pretty drastic difference. So obviously Flacco's comfortable at home. I just wanted to throw that in there before you made the picks. Just a little nugget.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, for me, the weather plays a big factor in this one.
Mm-hmm.
And Flacco is, he's big on his little short passes. He just doesn't have the arm strength to be like a Pat Mahomes, just start airing it out. He's just not, he doesn't have it. So I could see, like I said, I could see it being close just because of the weather and everything like that. So I could see it being a 3-point game. So I'd have to take the Broncos with the spread. Ravens straight up. What's the over-under?
45.5.
I definitely see this game being an under.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree in terms of the over under, especially with the weather conditions. Like you mentioned, if it's gonna be wet, it's gonna be a lot of short passes. Uh, you're not gonna be able to hit those long passes that Denver's hit with Emmanuel Sanders so far this season. We saw last week Demarius Thomas. The targets are there, and he did have 5 catches, but only went for 18 yards. I know the Broncos' offense struggled as a whole in terms of the passing game. Keenum had 2 interceptions last week. Might even been 3, but I'm pretty sure it was 2. But I see a lot of. I've heard this. I've heard your take. A lot of people not so. I wouldn't call it panic, but a lot of people not so confident in Demarius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. Um, Thomas week 1 did have 6 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown on 11 targets. He still saw double digit targets in week 2. Emmanuel Sanders, I believe, had 4 catches for 96 yards. So there was still some production there, but last week was more of Keenum struggles. And I kind of expect that to continue on the road against Baltimore, where their defense always plays better at home as well. Um, but that Broncos defense is really good. And giving 4.5 points in wet conditions, I don't see it for the Ravens. So I'm gonna have to take the Broncos with the spread. As far as straight up, I think the Broncos are going to pull it off, and mostly because if it is wet and the two teams are forced to run the ball more, I like the Broncos run game a lot better than I like the Ravens run game. The Ravens the last 2 weeks, well, definitely last week, Javaris Allen out-touched Alex Collins. The week before that, I think Alex Collins only had like 12 to 14 rushes. So I'm not very confident in their rush game. I don't think they are either. Otherwise, I think we'd see a bit more rushes a game. I understand last week the game script and the game flow, they were in catch-up mode. But I just don't trust that run game where on the flip side you have Phillip Lindsay, Royce Freeman, and Devontae Booker. I know Booker's been out of the rotation a bit, but with Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman alone, that's a nice 1-2 combination. So I'm going to have to take the Broncos straight up and with the spread. Keenum does worry me, but if it's going to be wet and they're going to be running the ball, I'm going to have to take that situation, especially with their defense. So I'm also going to have to take the under. Again, the weather plays a big factor in that. I just don't see an over in that situation if it's going to be wet. So we'll leave potentially wet Baltimore and head to potentially wet Washington, where the Packers are coming in as road favorites, giving 2.5 to the Redskins, with a 45.5 total over under. What are we doing here?
Um, I like the Packers. I don't understand how. Oh wait, no, they're giving 2.5. Excuse me, that makes sense. I like the chemistry you're starting to see with Geronimo Allison and Rodgers. I think it makes it even more dangerous because now they can run 3 wide out sets with 3 people who all have a chemistry with Rodgers, and that's deadly. So, I mean, the Redskins, not a bad team. Every week I'm worried about Jordan Reed, what he's going to break this week. One of the most athletic, tight ends we've ever seen, and he's Mr. Glass. So it's just, I get nervous with him. Adrian Peterson showed his age last week. He came crashing back down to reality. So it's going to depend on which version of them shows up. Do they get the week 1 version or the week 2? I personally just think Aaron Rodgers is out to prove something this year. So I'm taking the Pack all across.
Real quick, again, I got a little nugget for you just before you make your picks. I got Aaron Rodgers home and away. I'm not going to give the exact specifics, but on the road, he has 29 less touchdowns and 14 more interceptions thrown, and he's played 3 less games on the road. 76 games on the road compared to 79 games at home. So again, just another little nugget. And Washington's pass defense, I understand 1 week was against Arizona, but they are improved. And they do still have Josh Norman in the secondary. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Right. And I mean, and you take Josh Norman into account, but that's why the fact that he's got three options that he's comfortable with and he will hit like crazy makes him so much more dangerous. I think you're going to see quite a few scoreboards getting lit up this year because he's just got so many options and so many weapons. They did say Aaron Jones was taken off the suspension list,
Yeah.
but they did say he's not getting any. He's really not going to get any run yet. He's going to kind of have to earn his way back into the rotation. So, we'll see because Jamal Williams and Ty Montgomery pretty much have their spots locked up.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I just see the Packers running with this one. I see the Packers taking it straight up with the spread. What's the over-under?
45.5.
And he said it's going to be wet weather.
Yeah. Right back at you, guy.
I'm going to say the under. Any game that's got wet weather scares me. Even with, even if AP can look like the ageless wonder again, I get nervous.
Understandable. I'm the same way. I mean, when you throw the ball, if your hands are wet, naturally you risk it slipping out. And the wetter the balls get, I understand they switch them out a lot, but the wetter they get, the slicker they get. 45.5 point total kind of confuses me a little bit. Well, actually, it doesn't. It's just mostly the weather. So, I mean, I understand it. I just don't. I can't trust Alex Smith enough to put those kind of points up. Now, I like Alex Smith as a quarterback. I think he's a very good quarterback. It's just the Redskins aren't built to come from behind, which they had to do last week against Indianapolis, and we saw they put up 9 points at home against that Indy defense. So, and Alex Smith passed the ball 46 times. Jordan Reed hasn't been as big of a factor early on as I thought he would be, and considering he's been healthy. Adrian Peterson like you mentioned, came back down to earth last week. I don't see it with the Redskins. I just don't see the weapons on offense at wide receiver. The Green Bay's Packers defense has improved this year as well. So I'm going to have to agree. I'm going to take the Packers across the board. But the over-under, I mean, I don't see the Packers putting up 31. I don't see the Redskins putting up 21 or 24. So I'm going to have to agree, especially with the weather. I'm going to have to take the under. But we'll leave wet Washington, head to bright and sunny Jacksonville, where Tennessee is coming in at 7.5 point dogs. Before I kick it to you, I'll get the nugget out of the way first on this game. Last season, Tennessee beat Jacksonville twice. They beat Jacksonville in Jacksonville 37-16. Then they beat Jacksonville in Tennessee 15-10. Blake Bortles in those two games had 1 touchdown to 4 interceptions. And Derrick Henry in the first matchup had 14 carries for 92 yards and a touchdown, no catches. Week 2 at home in Tennessee was 28 carries for 51 yards, but did have 1 catch for 66 yards and a touchdown. It's also important to note that last week, Jacksonville against the New England running backs gave up 7 catches for 73 yards to James White and 1 catch for 7 yards for Sony Michel. So overall, 8 catches for 80 yards for the New England running backs last week against Jacksonville. And they've been somewhat susceptible to pass-catching running backs in the past, including last year. So with that being said, and a 39.5 point or a 39.5 total, what do you think here? You think the Titans can keep that winning streak going in Jacksonville this year?
No, I don't honestly. I realized that they got torched in the secondary by the Giants. Well, Jalen Ramsey did, and Odell Beckham. OBJ just absolutely decimated them. But Tennessee doesn't have anybody the caliber of OBJ. They're a decent team. Isn't there talks of more quarterback issues and injuries and everything like that over in Tennessee?
Yeah, Marcus Mariota's questionable. So if he's out, we'll see Blaine Gabbert again. And Blaine Gabbert threw for 117 yards last week against Houston. I believe he did throw for a touchdown, though, but still 117 yards. And this week he's playing a defense
A
that's much
sig-
better than Houston. So,
yeah, I mean, I think even with that 7.5 tag, unless there was, they were playing in like horrific weather conditions, then they might have a chance to keep it within 7. It's not that I think Jacksonville's offense is so explosive, although I'm not going to lie. Keelan Cole has looked pretty freaking amazing. And D.D. Westbrook is still D.D. Westbrook. He's got great athleticism. I'm just intrigued to see what they wind up, becoming when they mesh. But yeah, I'm going to take Jacksonville across the board. And I'm going to take, you said 39.5 was the over under?
yep.
Ooh, see, I got to go with the under. I see this being like a 21-10 game.
No, I agree. I'm taking the Jags across the board. I don't trust this Tennessee offense. They don't have a go-to guy. You'll throw Jalen Ramsey on Corey Davis. Peace. Um, Fournette though is Fournette's questionable. I think he's expected back this week, but he is still listed questionable. So that's something to monitor. Even if he's out, and even if T.J. Yeldon was out, it still doesn't matter to me. I'm taking the Jags across the board. That defense is too much. It's in the back of their mind that they lost to this team twice last year, so they're going to be hungry to go out there and try and beat the shit out of them. So, I mean, this is an easy one for me, Jags across the board. And I'm also going to take the under. I think, 21-10, like you said, 24-10, 24-7. I think we see around there, and that's 31 to 34 total. So I just don't see that game hitting that. We'll leave sunny Jacksonville and head to. I don't know if they were supposed to have any weather issues here, but we'll leave Jacksonville and head to Philadelphia for the Indianapolis Colts at the Eagles. Eagles are giving 6.5. The game has a 46 over/under total. What I will say actually that, as you know, JHIE's out, Darren Sproles is out, Alshon Jeffrey's likely out, and Carson Wentz is returning. And I did read that Jason Peters is questionable, that he missed practice today. He is expected to play, but he will be at less than 100%.
I absolutely love this game. Not from a standpoint of picking, but just because how do you give Andrew Luck 6.5 points? Like, you're basically almost giving the dude, you got to beat Andrew Luck by a touchdown.
They are the Super Bowl champs.
Right. But they also had all of the weapons that are now sitting on the sideline watching them play against the Indianapolis Colts.
Marlon Mack and Jack Doyle are also out as well, so that does factor in a bit, especially Jack Doyle.
Right. So when I start looking at it, I mean, I could see them winning by 6. I could see them winning by 3. I could see them losing, truthfully. I could see Philly losing this. And T.Y. Hilton is just too damn good. He's just too good. I'm going to take the Colts with the spread. The only thing is, it's Philly at home. Clement looked great, filling in. And you're not going to see the same problems that you saw when Nick Foles was in there, when you have Wentz in there. But I don't know, something about him having no real people to target, coming in for his first game back, I just don't trust it. I'm going to take the Colts straight up. And what was the over-under?
46.
Going with the under. I think it's going to be a little bit of some sloppy play on behalf of the Eagles. And I think the Colts, they don't need to score 40 points to win. They control the clock. It's Andrew Luck. I mean, it's a great quarterback matchup, though. I love Andrew Luck versus Carson Wentz. That's awesome.
Absolutely. I'm kind of torn. I've been torn on straight up. I like the Colts with the spread. I think, honestly, Jack Doyle being out is an upgrade for them because now they can play Eric Ebron full snaps, who's been more productive than Jack Doyle to date and is more athletic, a better receiver. So, and with T.Y. Hilton still being T.Y. Hilton, Marlon Mack being out just means it's going to be a timeshare between Naheem Hines and Jordan Wilkins. Naheem Hines rushed for a touchdown last week, but rushed for less than a yard per carry. Naheem Hines, Jordan Wilkins rushed 10 times for 61 yards and was a little more involved in the pass game. So I don't really think the running backs are going to play much of a factor for the Colts, but with Philly without their top two running backs, their pass catching back and their number one, we'll say workhorse or feature back, without him, without Alshon Jeffrey, Jason Peters going to play injured, Carson Wentz coming back from a knee injury. I want to see him in a game showing confidence in that knee, showing back to form and not focusing on the knee and just on football. And I think that's going to be in his mind until it's just a natural human reaction. So with that little bit of doubt in his mind, just in the back of his mind, kind of throwing his concentration off, I think that could play a little bit of a factor. So I'm going to have to take the Colts across the board. I think the Colts are being slept on early on. I mean, yeah, they lost week one at home against the Bengals, but the Bengals are 2-0, and they just beat the shit out of the Ravens inside. So I think, and the Colts just went into Washington, who shut out or beat up on Arizona week one, and the Colts went in there and beat them on the road 21-9. So I agree. I'm going to have to take the Colts across the board. I'm just going to have to take the over. I think it's a 27-24, 38-27, somewhere around there. So I'm going to go with the over. We'll leave Philly and head to the hottest city on the planet right now, Kansas City, for San Francisco at the Chiefs. Chiefs are 6.5-point favorites. This game is the highest total on the slate with 55.5. Eric Berry is likely out for the Chiefs this week, and Marquise Goodwin's questionable and potential game time decision.
Now, why is it that when you put up an over-under, I literally imagine Pat Mahomes just looking at it going, hey, coach, hold my beer. Watch this. This dude he's unbelievable. And that's the only way to describe it. I think he is unstoppable, truthfully. 10 touchdowns through 2 weeks. Didn't he break the record for the most touchdowns in a 2-week span? I mean, the guy. And the crazy thing about it is, I don't think Kareem Hunt had a really big game last week, did he?
No, he did have a touchdown, but it was one catch for 5 yards and a touchdown, and then he rushed another, I don't know, like 12 times or 14 times for 40 or 50 yards, but it wasn't much, no.
So they're doing all this damage, and they're not even using one of their biggest weapons. But I mean, look at the weapon. That's what I'm saying. Like you're putting up 4 or 5 touchdowns on average a game. Just keep doing what you're doing. I mean, Tyreek Hill is amazing. Travis Kelce doesn't even get that involved. I mean, he did last week. I think he caught 2 touchdowns last week.
Yeah, he had a huge week last week.
But week 1, they didn't even need him. So I mean, it's just this. That is the definition of a high-powered offense. And I still stick by, I think Jimmy G is trash. I don't have any faith in the guy. So I'm taking Chiefs all across. I think when you have Ben Roethlisberger with Antonio Brown and Juju, and he can't keep up with Pat Mahomes, Jimmy G is not. He's not equipped. And without Goodwin, no thanks. I'm definitely taking Chiefs across the board. What's the over-under again?
55.5.
55.5. I'm gonna have to go with the over, just because the Pat Mahomes factor. I mean, this guy could hypothetically put up 45 points on his own. and not even think twice about it. And it's not that I don't think the Niners are going to do anything. I just don't think they have the weapons necessary to keep up with an offense like the Chiefs. I'm not saying the 49ers might put up 14, 21 points. Who knows? But they're not going to be anywhere near the 45 that Pat Mahomes puts up. So I'm going Chiefs across the board with the over.
So far, I've nailed it with the Chiefs, except for they're winning these games straight up, which I wasn't expecting. I expected this defense to be a little bit worse than it has been, which has been a pleasant surprise for Kansas City. Like you had mentioned, Kareem Hunt hasn't even gotten involved yet. He hasn't been needed, and he could pop off at any week. Tyreek Hill could pop off at any week. Sammy Watkins could pop off at any week, who went over 100 yards last week for the first time since coming to Kansas City. And Travis Kelce could pop off at any time. I mean, this offense is just, it's perfectly constructed for Pat Mahomes and the Andy Reid offense. And the crazy thing about Pat Mahomes, as well as he's played and as well as he's passed, he hasn't even played up to his full potential yet, because he hasn't rushed, he hasn't needed to rush, and that's one of the strengths of Pat Mahomes is tucking the ball and taking off and running. Week one, their over under was 48.5, topped it against the Chargers. Week two, it was 53.5, topped it. This week, 55.5, gonna say topping it. I very easily think this game could be 34-24, 38-20. So I'm gonna have to take the Chiefs across the board. Eric Berry being out does hurt the Chiefs a little bit, obviously. I think this matchup, it doesn't compared to the other two, especially if there's no Marquise Goodwin. Matt Breida gives me a bit of pause for the 49ers if they use him the way they should be and kind of feature him over Alfred Morris. But I don't think that would be enough. So I'm going to take the Chiefs across the board with the over. Definitely excited to see that game, though. A lot of fantasy goodness there. We'll leave Kansas City and head to Miami, where the Raiders coming across the country to face the Dolphins, where the Dolphins are 3.5-point favorites, and the over/under is 44.5. Want to make a point of West Coast teams coming east, East Coast teams coming west. There's traditionally that has been an issue for those teams. So this is that case with the West Coast team coming east. So do you think that plays a factor? Do you think Oakland has a chance? What are you thinking
I mean, I definitely think that plays a huge factor. Oakland hasn't looked particularly sharp in either of their first two games. Derek Carr just doesn't seem like the same Derek Carr. He's just not putting any air under his passes. He was a deep threat before, and now not so much. Miami's coming off a pretty impressive win on a riding high Sam Darnold, from last week. So realistically, I'm going to have to go with Miami across the board. And the over-under is 44.
Yeah, 44.5.
I like Miami's offense. I'm frustrated with Oakland's. So I'm going to have to go under on this one. Just because, like I said about the other game, I could see this being a 21-10 game. I could see it being a 14-7 game. Never know.
Yeah, I'm a bit on the flip side. I think this game's a little more high scoring. I like the Raiders across the board. I like their performance last week going into Denver. Yes, they lost, obviously, but they played Keenum tough. They had 2 interceptions, a couple sacks. They played well, and it was on the road. I know they're coming cross country, but this is a must-win game for them. They're about to start 0-3 if they lose this game. Miami's overachieved a bit in terms of a record. They've played 2 weaker opponents, so they handled business. They did what they were supposed to. Devontae Parker was expected to play last week, but was a weird inactive. This week he's healthy and not on the injury report, so we'll have to see what goes on there. But if he comes back, that's a huge boost to the Dolphins' offense. But as long as the Dolphins continue to give Frank Gore as many touches as they do, I think that's actually going to limit their offense and hurt their offense. Kenyon Drake is the far superior talent and player at this point. I understand using Frank Gore, especially to spell Kenyon Drake, but Kenyon Drake needs more touches in the pass game. He needs more touches in the run game. He had a rush touchdown last week against the Jets. This Raiders defense isn't very good, but I just don't trust the Dolphins. And like I said, I think the Raiders are going to have a sense of urgency and kind of playing with some heat, feeling like they're going to have to play for their season. So I'm taking the Raiders across the board, and I'm taking the over. Actually, I'm going to take the under because I think this game. I'm pretty confident that the score is around 24-17 or 24-20. So I think again that half a point kind of makes the difference for me. But we'll leave Miami, unfortunately, to go to Houston to watch the. I'm not even gonna make a joke. See the Giants at the Texans. Texans are 5.5-point home favorites with a 42.5 total. What are you thinking here?
Well, Clowney's back for this matchup, right?
Yeah, I think the exact wording on him was he should be good to go this week.
Well, now he lines up on the right side.
Yes.
Right? He doesn't. Yeah. So
right side on the defense, left side.
Right. So not the side Tyler Flowers is on.
No, not Eric Flowers' guy.
Or Eric Flowers, excuse me.
He'll have Nate Solder.
So at least that's a little bit, it's a lot better of an option. Nate can put up much more of a fight than our good boy Flowers. Wasn't he a first round pick 2 years ago?
Yeah. Yep.
Jeez.
He was like a top 15 pick or something too, if I'm not mistaken.
He was a top 15 pick, and he's like a bottom 15 player. My fear here is that pass rush makes Eli forget that Odell Beckham Jr. is one of the most athletic creatures to ever step onto a football field. He's not even a human being. He's above human status. He's an animal when he's out there, and Eli just seems to forget. Just throw him the ball. Just get in his general direction. Barkley, they finally got Barkley involved last week, which was genius that it only took him 2 weeks.
For 14 targets, 12 catches for 80 yards.
Yeah.
But
so they
heavily involved.
Yeah. Finally they learned. But again, I feel like they coached themselves out of a victory again. It's how I felt last week. It's how I felt week one. I don't know. The play calling leaves me scratching my head sometimes. You've got a guy with great hands, and instead of using him on flare-outs to drop passes, you're just letting your quarterback get annihilated back there, and now you're going against another pretty good pass rush. The 5.5 tag scares me. But after what Tavon Austin did to that secondary, no Eli Apple, no Olivier Vernon, I think DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller are going to have a field day on this team. And so is Deshaun Watson. I mean, I got to go Texans, especially at home. Texans with the spread. Texans straight up. And what was the over-under is 44.5?
42.5. But before you pick the over-under, the Giants' 2 games this year, week 1 against Jacksonville, the over-under was 42.5, and that game went under. And last week against the Cowboys was also 42.5, and the game went under. So just so far, the Giants are both games they've played have gone under their projected totals.
Right. The only problem is neither one of those teams have the offensive prowess that the Texans do. And they were close. It's not like they went under and it was like a 7-0 game or a 10-7 game. they were within a couple of points. So I'm definitely going to take the over here. I just think I think the Giants wake up. They have too many weapons not to score points. I just think they get beat by a touchdown because on a go route by Will Fuller or DeAndre Hopkins, that secondary gets burned, and there's not enough time for Eli to make one of his miraculous comebacks.
And Evan Ingram was taken off the injury report. He's good to go, so he will be playing this week. Sterling Shepard's been invisible. Last week, Odell was invisible. A big reason for that was due to the offensive line. Eli Manning he had no time, couldn't set his feet and throw downfield. That's why we saw the 12 catches to Barkley. And both these teams are 0-2. So both these teams are in a tough spot. I think this is going to be a really good game. I hate getting suckered into this. Every single week I do it. And it's like, when are you going to learn? But there's just too much talent there. The Giants, I have to take the Giants getting the 5.5. I think that's a bit too much. I think this is going to be a hard-fought game. Both teams are 0-2. So I think they're going to be looking, both teams are going to be going 100%. This could be the season for both of them. I mean, the Giants have to deal with Philly in their division. The Texans have to deal with the Jaguars in their division. So there's two really strong teams in this division. So I think both these teams are looking at this game as like the Raiders almost as a must-win type game. So I have to take the Giants with the spread. And we take the Giants straight up.
Homer.
I'm getting suckered into it again. Deshaun Watson also hasn't looked very good this year either. And last week, he looked shitty against the Tennessee Titans defense. Titans defense isn't terrible, but they lost the best player on their defense last year in Avery Williamson. And they also lost Jason McCourty, or Devin McCourty. Jason, I think it was. So their defense isn't that good. Now, I know the Giants' defense has underachieved, but I think it's a bit more of a higher scoring game, too. That's why I don't think either one of these defenses really shut each other down. And J.J. Watt's been a bit of a shell of himself. That guy's been so injured the past couple of years that it's really it's adding up now. Back injuries are no joke, especially for a D lineman. So I'm taking the Giants across the board with the over. Prove me wrong again, and I'll see you next week. We'll leave Houston and head to L.A. for the battle for L.A., where the Chargers at the Rams. Rams are 6.5-point favorites, but this game has an over-under of 48. Rams have been off to a hot start, as we know. 2-0, 2 blowouts. Shutout last week against Arizona. Not saying much, but still a shutout. Chargers are 1-1. Beat up on the Bills last week. Lost to the Chiefs at home week 1. What are we doing here?
Well, I feel like you have to take the loss to the Chiefs and just throw it out the window. Because by the end of this season, everybody's going to have a loss to the Chiefs.
They're going undefeated. You're calling it now?
Listen, yes. Yes, I am. I think it's going to wind up being the Rams and the Chiefs undefeated for the Super Bowl. How awesome would that be? I'm just kidding. I don't think the Rams do. So I kind of have to throw that game out because you would need Tom Brady and 2 other quarterbacks just to keep up with the type of numbers that kid was putting up. So I mean, I throw that game out. And last week they played the Bills, which, I mean, that's not even fair. That's like challenging your 6-year-old little brother to a game of one-on-one basketball. I mean, it's just Arizona looks atrocious. They forgot who David Johnson is.
Yeah.
LA just looks. I mean, the Rams. Excuse me, I'm saying LA like you can differentiate. The Rams just look too damn explosive to me. I realize that one of their games that they destroyed a team was, again, you're playing the Cardinals. I get it. It's just work so well together. Like watching that defense move, it moves like a unit. It reminds me a lot of like the Legion of Boom, the way everybody's always covering each other. There's no gaps, there's no holes. The Chargers obviously have more weapons than anything that the Rams have seen. So I think it stays close. But I'm going to say the Chargers with the spread. I'm going to take the Rams straight up. I just don't think there's any team good enough really to beat them right now. And what was the over-under?
48.
I'm going to take the over, not confidently though, just because I feel like this could go one of two ways. This could wind up being a, 10-7 game or a 14-7 game, or it could wind up being a 35-21 game. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. I'm taking the Rams straight up. I'm taking the Chargers with the spread, and I'm taking the over. But I'm much more confident in the over. Spoiler alert. This is the nosebleed section's game of the week is the Rams at the Chargers. I'm expecting a bit of a shootout. Nothing crazy, not like not like we saw in week 1 with Tampa and the Saints, but 31-28. I think it stays close though. The Chargers have, Melvin Gordon's a great receiving back. Had 3 touchdowns last week, two catching or 2 receiving, 1 rushing. Caught, I think it was 10 or 12 passes for 102 yards in week 1. So he's heavily involved in the offense. They still have Tyrell Williams. Mike Williams caught a touchdown last week and had 5 for 81 in week 1, so he's emerged as a reliable target. And they still have Keenan Allen. So I think the Chargers have the firepower to keep this game close. The Rams' defense is very good, but they shut down Oakland and they shut down Arizona. So this is a much bigger test, and I think they pass it, but not with flying colors. As for the Chargers, their defense sucks. Joey Bosa's out again this week. Brandon Cooks has been one of the best receivers in the league early on. The chemistry he's shown with Goff has been pretty incredible, in my opinion, that they've been this on the same page this well, this early. He's overtaken the number 1 spot on that team, hands down. But they still have Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, so they have plenty of receiving options with Todd Gurley. I think they pull it out straight up. I got the Chargers with the spread and the over. I think that's going to be a great game, though. I'm excited, looking forward to watching that one. Next, we'll leave LA and head to Arizona, where the Bears are 4.5-point road favorites and an over/under of 38.5. Arizona has absolutely sucked to start this year. David Johnson in week 1 had 13 carries for 48 yards, 1 catch for 3 yards. Or that was last week against LA. Week 1 was 9 rushes for 37 yards and a touchdown, and 5 catches for 30 yards. So they're not using him much, and it's showing in their offense. Sam Bradford also threw for 90 yards last week in 4 quarters with an interception. So he didn't pass 100 passing yards, barely topped it in week 1, and they named him the starter still for this week, although he is on a short leash. So I think kind of like the Browns we saw on Thursday night, we'll see a similar situation where Sam Bradford struggles again, and we see Josh Rosen come in and kind of give him a little momentum boost. But what are you thinking here in terms of picks?
Well, I just don't think Arizona's very good. Fitz is questionable. And I believe he had it was a hamstring injury, wasn't it? Or was it a foot?
I'm not sure on what it was.
I know it was an injury that caused me a little bit of concern for the likelihood of re-injuring it if he rushes back. So on a team that's not even firing on half a cylinder, their offense doesn't do anything for me. Not that I'm like overly impressed by Chicago, because for some reason the idiot coaches decided that Jordan Howard just doesn't deserve to showcase his talent. We're just going to limit him like he's a second tier running back instead of giving him enough shots like the top tier guy that he is. So I'm hoping that maybe the coaching staff figures out this football thing and starts getting Jordan Howard more involved. I don't think either way it makes a difference. I think Arizona is just that bad. So I'm going to take the Bears across the board. What's the over under?
38.5.
That's such a low over under, but I'm going to have to go under. I think Chicago maybe puts up 21, 24, something like that. And I think at most you'll see from Arizona will be 10.
Yeah, I mean, you got to factor in this Bears defense too. I mean, they're absolutely incredible. And Roquan Smith, their first round pick, is starting now. I mean, he's damn good already, and he's just a rookie who's played in 2 games, started one. Khalil Mack, um, showing he was worth every penny of that $140+ million extension he got. Um, I'm taking the Bears straight up. I'm taking the Bears with the spread. And I'm going to take the over, though. I think Arizona, like I mentioned, it's going to be kind of a Browns situation where Bradford struggles, Rosen comes in, or the game gets out of hand and Rosen comes in and they score some garbage time points. But I just can't. I will not take the Arizona Cardinals for the next couple weeks unless they're getting a crazy spread. But I just can't trust them until they show me something and the coaching staff figures it out to get David Johnson more involved. I mean, you can't. It's unacceptable to rush him 9 times. I don't care if it's a blowout. It still had to get up to that point. And Sam Bradford was struggling that bad. If you're not going to make a quarterback change, then you need to get the ball to David Johnson. And why they didn't run more screens or why they didn't run more pass plays to him, that befuddles me. I mean, there's so much you can do with him. You can line him up out wide. You can line him up in the slot. You can line him up in the backfield. I mean, there's so much you could do with him, but they don't utilize him correctly. I think the coaching staff there is very basic. Um, Bruce Arians was a creative offensive mind and found ways to get David Johnson the ball. So I don't think the coaching staff, I don't think Steve Wilkes is capable of doing that right now. So Bears across the board with the over. We'll head out of Arizona and head to Seattle, where the Cowboys are coming in, getting 2.5 points. The game has a total of 41.5. KJ Wright is expected to be out again this week. Michael Kendricks is questionable. Earl Thomas is also questionable and a true questionable. As far as the Cowboys, I don't believe there's any injuries. What are you thinking here?
Well, I made the mistake of going against my boys last week. It's not a mistake I'm going to make again. That defensive front looks like what I've wanted it to be for the last 3-4 years as a Cowboys fan. Yes, granted, they played against Eli Manning, who they know very well, but they're still leading the league in sacks right now.
You can't take any credit away from them. I mean, look what they did week 1. Again, I don't care if there was 3 offensive linemen out. Look what they did week 1 with Cam. They obviously Carolina won, but they held them to 16 points. That's a hell of a
Yeah, and the timeshare, I think, was it wound up being 65%. Carolina had the ball in offense.
Exactly. So they were on the field most of that game and still held them to that. Sean Lee is questionable as well, but he did say today to Jerry Jones that he's good to go. So
I think it was more of a precautionary when they were talking about it. I think with how terrible Seattle's offenses looked, they're not what they used to be. And I think with that front three being able to cause some damage and wreak some havoc, I think the Cowboys remembered that they're a run-first offense, which was good. Got a couple of good plays that opened up the field for them. I'm expecting this game, honestly, as long as he's not injured or in any shape, way, shape, or form or limited, I expect Cole Beasley to have a great game this week. So I'm taking the Cowboys straight up. Cowboys with that spread, because I think they're going to win by a field goal at minimum. What's the over-under?
Cowboys are getting 2.5.
No, the over-under.
Over-under, I'm sorry, 41.5.
I'm going to go with the under. The Cowboys offense looked pretty good last week, but let's see if it's a sustainable amount that they're going to be a decent offense that can put up some touchdowns and some points. Um, so, and I don't know, Seattle, they worry me more than anything right now.
Yeah, Doug Baldwin being out's a big issue. It hurts them quite a bit. I'm still fucking furious about this. I really don't understand what the Seahawks are doing at all. Didn't the game wasn't out of hand last week, and they didn't establish the run. Chris Carson actually looked good on the ground. Rashad Penny had a couple moments too, and I think they ran the ball 16, 17 times total. CJ Procise didn't see the field until the Seahawks' last drive where he caught two passes. CJ Procise is a very good pass catching back. We've seen that before he got injured. When Doug Baldwin went down, um, Jerron Brown stepped up into the number 3 receiver role, and in the number 4 receiver role, they said was going to be C.J. Procise. They said they want to use him more, including lining him up out wide at receiver. They didn't do that. Clearly, it hurt them because Carson and Penny, neither one of them are good pass catching backs. Russell Wilson has always been at his best when he does have a pass catching back where he can dump it off to when he does get in trouble. We've seen it so many times. Tyler Lockett and Doug Baldwin going deep, and they're deep down the field, and he dumps it off underneath to a running back, and they take it 20, 25 yards on a 3rd and 10. So that's been a part of the Seattle's offense when they've had success. Why Procise was not part of the game plan, I will never understand. What's the best way to stop a pass rush? Short passing plays. What's CJ Procise? A short pass catching running back. I mean, to me, it makes all the sense in the world. But then again, I'm not an NFL coach. What the fuck do I know, right? Um, but I do think they get him a bit more involved this week. I think they will realize the importance of it. Pete Carroll's not an idiot. It might take him a little bit to figure it out, but he'll get it figured out in terms of getting Russell Wilson some help. And the only way they can really do that right now is Procise. I think Brandon Marshall's a bit more involved. I don't think Tyler Lockett catches a deep touchdown or a touchdown this week. He looked really good last week against the Bears, and his touchdown was a really nice, what was it, post to the pylon or a corner to the pylon over the shoulder catch. Perfect throw from Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is still Russell Wilson. The Cowboys do have a very, very good pass rush, but they don't have someone the caliber of Khalil Mack. And we've seen Russell be able to get away from D linemen in the past. So I'm not. And the Seattle's played 2 games. Their first 2 games, both have been on the road. So this is their first game coming home, 0-2. I expect the 12th man to be in full effect. I'm taking the Seahawks across the board with the over. The Cowboys' offense scares me, but the Seahawks' defense is not the Legion of Boom anymore. And Earl Thomas, if he does play, is going to be at less than 100%. I agree with you on Cole Beasley 100%. I think Cole Beasley will be a huge factor in this game. And I actually think I'm gonna call it now, and I think this is the first big week for Michael Gallup. I think we see, and what I mean by big week, I don't think he tops 100 yards, but I think we see Michael Gallup at around 5 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown, or 6 to 7 catches for 80 yards. So I think Gallup kind of makes a name for himself a little bit this week, and the Cowboys finally realize that they need to get him involved because this receiver core isn't really working too well right now. And they did just re-sign Bryce Butler again too. So I don't expect that to play too much of a factor this week, but Butler does have chemistry with Dak trying to find a positive out of that signing. And we have to mention Dez was seen at a concert with Jerry Jones. But we'll head out of Seattle and we'll head to Detroit for the Sunday night game. I'm actually really, really looking forward to this game. We have ex-Patriots defensive coordinator Matt Patricia, now head coach of the Lions, taking on the Patriots in Detroit. New England is 6.5-point favorites on the road. Game has a total of 53.5. The Patriots, as we know, just traded for Josh Gordon, who is questionable with a hamstring, has practiced on a limited basis, is expected to make his debut. How much he plays, it might be based a little more so on the playbook at this point as opposed to his health. So what are we thinking here about the Patriots and the Lions?
Well, the Lions scare me. Um, week one they came out and got absolutely decimated by the Jets, and they bounced back. They're. I didn't get to catch that game last week. Um, how the Lions really looked. Um,
They
if
sucked in
they
the first half. They really struggled in the first half. They were down by 20 at one point. Did come back, had the ball left down 7, I believe, where they could have tied it. But yeah, I mean, you can't fall behind to the San Francisco 49ers without Marquise Goodwin and an offense of that caliber. So I mean, in all reality, they really didn't look good again last week either.
yeah, and I mean, as much as it's cool that Patricia's the head coach and he comes from the freakish mind of the Belichick.
They haven't really
Um,
panned out though. The Belichick disciples haven't panned out. Romeo Crennel didn't make it. Eric Mangini's not coaching anymore. The only one in the league right now is Bill O'Brien,
well, and think about it this way: what do you think the mad scientist is going to do? I mean, he's got some stuff whipped up, I'm sure.
and he knows
Uh,
Matt Patricia well.
and the Patriots last week looked abysmal at best. Um, so I think you're going to see a pissed Gronk, pissed off Brady. I think they're going to come out and they're going to make a statement in this game. I think they keep their foot on the Lions' throat and give them the Mufasa treatment from the Lion King, and that's it. It's over.
That's it. It's over.
So I'm going Pats across the board. What's the over under?
53 and a half. But before you do the over under, the Lions have hit the over in both of their games, and the Patriots have hit the over in both of their games as well. So
Yeah, no, I was going with the over. Bill Belichick and Tom Brady are the only team that if I think that they're going to blow somebody out, I'll still take the over because they don't care.
no,
They
no, over a
there
box score.
there's no such thing as professionalism with them. It's win big, win always.
Get that bullshit professionalism out of here. You don't like it, stop it. That's what the fans want to see. You're getting paid to play the sport. Players get incentives. That's the one thing. I don't mean to get off topic or anything like that, but I want to throw this in real quick. That's one thing that kind of gets blown out of proportion and whatnot is when people see scores running up. You got to remember, most of these players have some are game incentives where if they do a certain amount in a game, they get paid extra money. Most of them, if not all of them, have season incentives where if they, for example, if Tom Brady throws for 40 touchdowns in a year, he gets an extra $2 million he makes. So for some of these players that are trying to make a name for themselves, um, you know, aren't on big contracts and are incentive based contracts, that kind of stuff is a big deal. I hate that you're taking money potentially out of these people's and these families' mouths and out of their pockets. But I know they make a lot, but still, it's not the point. And NFL is actually the worst in terms of salary cap and what the players make, and in terms of length of the career. So, but just to finish it off, these players have incentives in these contracts, and other teams are so worried about it. Well, then stop it. It's not right to say to these people like, okay, yeah, because you're beating us too bad, it's not fair. It's not right for you to have a chance to, you know, make more money or make the incentives. But I digress. Um, I agree about the Patriots winning straight up. One thing that pissed me off about the Patriots last week was James White was killing it on the ground and was having nonstop success against Jacksonville, but wasn't played enough. Um, for whatever reason, Bill Belichick's usually really smart and is really good about that kind of stuff. But for whatever reason, last week, James White was not used nearly enough, and it showed. Um, I like the Patriots straight up. I like the Lions with the spread. 0-2, coming back home. Tough loss last week. Tough loss week one. I just think they put up a serious fight. I don't think they win straight up, but I think that 6.5 is a little too big. I think we see a 3 to 4 point game, but I agree with the over. I'm going to take that as well. I think we see a shootout, no doubt. Um, I'm a rapper now. Um, we'll leave Detroit and head to Tampa Bay, where for Monday Night Football we got the Steelers coming in as 1.5 point. They're giving 1.5 points, and the over under is 53.5. Does Fitz Magic pull another rabbit out the hat?
Well, here's the thing. If Fitzmagic was going against a quarterback that didn't look as bad as Ben's looked, wasn't on the road where Ben always looks bad, I don't know. I don't want to be a believer, but he did it back to back.
They did, and didn't they beat Philly at home? I mean, they beat Philly last week.
Yeah, they beat Philly in Philly.
No, it was in Tampa, wasn't it? Yeah, it
No,
was
I'm
in
pretty
Tampa
sure.
because week one was in. They went to New Orleans last week. Was in Tampa.
Oh, so this is their first home game?
Second home game, Tampa, because they played Philly last week in Tampa.
Oh, yeah. Um, so, yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. I can't see Big Ben doing anything significant just because it's him on the road. So I'm gonna have to go ahead here, give it to Fitzmagic. Say they're gonna take it with the spread, straight up. What's the over under?
53.5. Just make a quick point. Um, the Steelers they hit the over. I don't think they hit the over in week one. Let me just double check real quick. Um, no, it hit the over. They hit the over week one against the Browns, and they hit the over last week as well against the Chiefs. So they've hit the over in both games. So have the Buccaneers.
Yeah, I just it's Ben on the road. I'm gonna go with the under.
All right, I'm on the exact opposite side on this one. Last week, James Conner didn't have much of a game. He wasn't really needed. Um, Tampa's playing way over their heads. At some point, they're going to digress. They're really not this good, or regress. Excuse me. They're not. They're really not this good. This defense, it's not sustainable. I just don't. It's a Fitz magical ride, but this Fitz magic carpet ride is coming to an end. Like what it did there. I know Ben on the road, but I think this defense really is as bad. I think Ben is pissed off. Antonio Brown is pissed off. Mike Tomlin's pissed off. Juju Smith-Schuster's pissed off. James Conner wants to prove that week one wasn't a fluke. I'm taking the Steelers across the board, and I'm taking the over. Both teams have hit the over in their games so far this year. I know 53.5 is a lot, but the Steelers' defense hasn't been great. They gave up 21 points week one to the Browns. Tyrod Taylor and the Browns, not Baker Mayfield and the Browns. Um, I just, I can't go with the Bucks. I took them last week against Philly with the spread, just because I think Philly's overrated. But the Steelers' offense is gonna get it going. I know Ben on the road, but it's the Bucks. Something's got to give. Something's got to give. So I got to take the Steelers across the board with the over. Um, but that wraps us up for this week. We'll be back next week. Um, we had a minor change, a couple hour change to the DFS podcast. So next week that'll go back to, I believe you'll be able to make it next week.
Yep.
So next week it'll go back to me and Chris doing the DFS podcast. So that'll go back to the two of us, and then most likely be doing the Pick'em podcast again together next week. Any shout outs? Anything you want to say before we get out of here?
Yeah, I want to send a big shout out to Tavon Austin. for showing he's still got some wheels, and then the little tip of the cap that he gave to the Cowboys for having some faith in him. So my hat tip to you, good sir, for your play.
And where can we find you on Twitter?
You can find me at Hazazel T on Twitter. If you have anything to say, if you're keeping a running tally and you're beating me and you're getting better on the calls than I am, throw it up on my Twitter. Show me, challenge me.
Yeah. Well, I'll get the by next week. I should have everything tallied, ready to go, and I have been keeping track of it. We are keeping track of it throughout the year. I've been busy. I haven't been able to get them up. I will get them up this week, probably after week 3. I'll have them up for week 4. So that'll be in the next video. Um, Appreciate you for tuning in, Chris. Appreciate you for taking the time out and joining me. Um, you can reach me. Same thing if you want to talk shit to me, you want to argue with me, you want to say I made a great point, whatever you want to do. Hit me up on Twitter at Millsy021. And if you play fantasy, best of luck this weekend. And we'll see you later. Peace.